Stephen Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In July of last year, as part of our ongoing inquiry, the International Development Committee visited the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as part of that delegation, we went to see a hydroelectric power plant in the Virunga National Park, which has been part funded by CDC. It's reinvesting a proportion of its earnings into community development projects and protecting the environment. The plant is bringing electricity to a region in which only 15% of the population has previously had access to power, and it has the potential to generate millions of dollars each year and thousands of jobs for local communities. I cite this because I believe that projects like this are impressive and they demonstrate the positive impact that CDC is already having. We know, as other colleagues on both sides of the House have said, during the course of this, but of course, I'm happy to give way.
The gentleman for giving way, and I also, as he knows, was on that visit, and I think that's probably one of the most impressive projects I have ever seen, providing light and heat, light to so many people in DRC who desperately need it. And those are just the sorts of projects that we've talked about and said that CDC should be investing more in, because they are creating jobs but making life better for so many more people.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, who is a very highly valued member of the International Development Committee, and I agree with what she said. And the purpose of my remarks during report stage this afternoon is really to reinforce the point she's just made. These are positive projects. We want to ensure that that high level of quality that we saw in that particular example in Congo becomes the norm across all of CDC's investments, particularly as the limit is increased. And I'll come on to that in a moment. We know that the private sector provides around 9 out of every 10 jobs in developing countries. Its development, its success, is vital to helping countries achieve sustainable and long-term development. And therefore, I think it does make sense, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the CDC's investment threshold to be increased. Poverty reduction must be at the heart of the government's development agenda, and that must explicitly include in the work of the CDC. In 2011, the predecessor International Development Committee produced a report entitled The Future of CDC as the group approached its then cap of £1.5 billion set out in the 1999 CDC Act. The committee's report concluded that the mandate of the CDC should be changed to a specific focus on poverty alleviation. And given that job creation is one of the very best ways to reduce poverty, it is important that the government has a development investment arm that will help poorer countries create new and innovative jobs. And as has been said on both sides of the House, the CDC made some significant changes following the 2008 National Audit Office report and the 2011 International Development Committee report, in line with recommendations to move towards a focus on the alleviation of poverty. As has been said, these changes were reviewed recently by a further National Audit Office report released just before second reading of this bill in November 2016. The report was mostly positive, and it noted in particular that the 2012-16 investment strategy shifted the investment focus of the CDC to poorer countries. That is welcome. It also noted that the CDC has exceeded the targets agreed with DFID relating to financial performance and development impact. However, it also said that the CDC should be doing more to measure the development impact of its investments. This will not only provide a better basis for investment decisions, but will also increase the transparency of the CDC. Poverty alleviation is absolutely central if we're going to make a success of the global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals agreed in 2015. Africa needs to generate 15 million new jobs every year if it's to achieve its global goals, and that can only be achieved by working with the private sector, including with organisations like CDC. CDC has helped create nearly 25,000 jobs in Africa and South Asia directly, and they say over 1 million indirectly. The businesses in their portfolio support around 18 million jobs. So I am happy to see the threshold being raised. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have a number of concerns that I want the Minister to respond to when he speaks in report stage this afternoon. Of course, of course.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he will know that I very much respect his passion in this area, but more particularly actually the very balanced way in which he's dealt with the issues around CDC. Does he share some of my concerns, however, that we are risking having a rather more prescriptive approach towards this part private sector organisation than we are to a range of NGOs who are beneficiaries of large-scale programmes in relation to DFID, and that might actually also be somewhat distorting. And whilst he makes some, I think, very valid points about some of the concerns, equally, if we're going to hamstring CDC in the way that one or two of these amendments would have us do, that would be, I think, an undesirable outcome for DFID.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman. I'm certainly not arguing for prescriptions to be applied to CDC that wouldn't be applied to other organisations funded through DFID. And my honourable friend, the member for Cardiff South and Penarth, has already made the point that the Secretary of State shortly before Christmas set out a number of conditions for suppliers to the department, and I think he makes a very valid point that that should apply to CDC in the same way that it applies to other suppliers. I'm emphasising my support for the amendment which says that poverty reduction should be at the heart of the work of CDC, and I think all of us would agree that poverty reduction should be at the heart of the entire development and aid strategy of the government, both of DFID and of other parts of government. So I think I can plead not guilty to the charge that he's putting to me. I'm not proposing in any sense to hamstring CDC, and I'm certainly not proposing, and I don't believe that the amendments being proposed on this side of the House seek to impose any restriction on CDC that would be out of step with the sorts of restrictions that we would apply to other bodies that are funded through overseas development assistance. Of course.
My friend is making a very strong point, and would he agree with me that that is indeed very, very much the point? It's about bringing CDC more in line with DFID's overall priority countries, its priority sectors, and indeed the restrictions that it places on other users of UK aid money.
Yes, I agree with that, and this is why I think it is very important. And I've read what the Minister said during committee stage, and there is reassurance that certainly can be gained from that, but I look forward to hearing him again today. The sense that with what is a very substantial increase in the potential money that could be going through CDC, that we're going to make sure that this money really is geared to poverty reduction wherever it is invested. And part of that, as my honourable friend rightly points out, is which parts of the world, which countries are going to be invested in, because investments in some countries can deliver a lot more, both in terms of jobs and poverty reduction, than investment in others. So as I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm happy with there being an increase in the investment threshold, but we have to ensure that the money is spent wisely. The current investment plan has now expired, 2012 to 2016, and we are yet to see the next investment plan for 2017 to 21. I'd like to suggest, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it would have been beneficial for this bill and for the government, and indeed for CDC itself, if we had seen the plans for the next 4 years of investment before Parliament was asked to raise the investment threshold. And the amendment from my honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State, would ensure that if the government brings forward regulations to further increase the limit, this would have to be preceded by a detailed plan of investment from CDC, which could be scrutinised by Parliament. And I welcome and support that amendment, and I'm happy to give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Successive governments can be very proud of the role that the Department for International Development has played in improving the lives and the economies of some of the world's poorest countries. But in light of much of the public debate around international development spending, not only is what my honourable friend said correct in principle from parliamentary scrutiny point of view, does he agree with me that this is absolutely essential for maintaining and building on public confidence in international development spending?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I absolutely agree with what he said, and it chimes with what I'm going to conclude with, which is to talk about the importance of scrutiny, including scrutiny by this House, both of CDC and of the government. Of course. Yes.
Thank you. It's been very, very generous. Whilst I actually have a lot of sympathy for what he says, I mean, it would be useful, I think, in the context of this debate to have an idea of the sort of programmes that the CDC might have in mind for the future. And I hope that whilst this bill goes through the passage in another place as well, there might be an opportunity for us to be able to do that at some point. However, would he also perhaps recognise that given the nature of CDC's expertise and experience, that it might well have, to an extent, slightly different goals to other non-governmental organisations who receive DFID money. In other words, that this absolute predominance for the alleviation of poverty could, in some cases, perhaps not entirely apply to everything that the CDC does, given its expertise, particularly its private sector expertise and experience.
I think the priority, I guess, needs to be on poverty alleviation. And I gave the example when I started, and the Honourable Lady, his honourable friend, the member for Mid Derbyshire, reinforced my point about the project that we visited, and undoubtedly that project delivered things beyond poverty reduction, but absolutely at the heart of that investment and the impact of that investment is the reduction of poverty. And I think for that always to be kept in mind is a very, very useful lodestar for DFID when it's approaching the work of CDC. I think I would need some persuading that a project should be funded that didn't have some connection to the alleviation and reduction of poverty. Let me now turn to the issues of scrutiny that were referred to by my honourable friend, the member for Ilford North. The recent NAO report, as was said rightly by the honourable gentleman, the member for Bedford, revealed that the development impact score is on average being met. But that is only on average. CDC is making some investments that do fall below target. 23% of investments since 2013 have fallen below the target score based on their investment difficulty and propensity to generate employment. Given that the objective stated in CDC's current investment policy is, and I quote, to focus its investments into the geographies and sectors where there is the most potential for development impact, it's unclear as to why CDC is investing in projects that achieve lower scores. And so I would say to the Minister, along with a more robust approach to measuring development impact as highlighted by the NAO, I would like to see some sort of minimum threshold for impact implemented in the new investment strategy. As with all DFID spending, and indeed broader ODA spent by other government departments, the International Development Select Committee will scrutinise very closely CDC's work in the months and years ahead. It is vital that we ensure that the taxpayer, the British taxpayer, gets value for money for every pound that is spent on international development. As has been said on all sides of the House, CDC has become more transparent following the reports of the committee in 2011 and the NAO in 2008, but more can still be done to ensure that money is being spent as well as possible. One way in which that could be achieved, and I would ask the Minister to explore this, is to allow the Independent Commission for Aid Impact to play a bigger role, for example, carrying out a regular assessment of CDC investments, allowing scrutiny so that we can really ensure full effectiveness and value for money for the programmes in which CDC invests. I think we can say that CDC has been a world leader among development finance institutions in publishing details of their investments since 2012 under the International Aid Transparency Initiative, and that is very welcome. But I would suggest it would improve transparency further if they published similar details on their entire active investment portfolio, including those that were made prior to 2012. And I'd ask the Minister to address that point when he responds to the debate. I think this would enable greater scrutiny of CDC's entire portfolio and hopefully provide assurance to the public that all CDC investments are being focused where they need to be on the goal of poverty reduction. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do believe that CDC has helped the United Kingdom to be a leader in global development, But as with any area of government spending, we need to ensure that every penny is going to the places where it can have the greatest effect, the right places and the right people delivering value for money for the taxpayer. One of the ways in which we can achieve this is by regular scrutiny of the CDC, including by Parliament, and I give a commitment that the International Development Select Committee will play our role in ensuring that we do scrutinise and hold to account both the Department and CDC as the additional money is allocated. But most importantly, as with all areas of development spending, we need to ensure that the ultimate goal is poverty alleviation and eradication, and we never lose focus on that.